Scannell, Patrick Gasson, Ithaca nondage. Agwe wayen heo hongye, agatwe nondak ston hongwe hongwe. Hi, my name is Patrick, and I live in Ithaca in upstate New York. This region of the state is located in the ancestral territories and homelands of the Cayuga Nation, one of the constituent nations of the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois Confederacy, which from east to west includes the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora nations. Growing up, I always tried to learn the basics of several languages from around the world as a hobby, mainly European languages, but also a few Asian and African languages. But recently I realized I'd never really tried my hand at learning a bit of an American language. And when I say American, I'm using that word to refer to both indigenous languages and new languages that formed in the Americas. So having spent a few years living, studying, and working in this part of New York State, I finally decided to learn the basics of the Cayuga language, which is very much endangered, but is spoken in parts of New York State, Oklahoma, and Ontario today. And a lot of my friends and colleagues have been kind of amused by this, since Cayuga is such an understudied language, even in this part of the world where it originated. But understanding the language really clears a path toward a more holistic understanding of indigenous cultures of this part of the world as well as local history. And I've personally found the experience extraordinarily enriching, driving around New York State or Pennsylvania and seeing landmarks or places in the landscape and being able to point to them and say, now I have a better sense of how this place came to be what it is today, or what happened here in the 17th and 18th centuries that led to our contemporary realities. So I have a blog post, and it's linked in the description below, of resources that I've been using to learn Cayuga grammar as well as some conversational vocabulary. It's been a really fascinating process, in part because Cayuga really operates with just three parts of speech. So most any word you'll encounter is a verb, noun, or particle, and a lot of nouns are either directly derived from verbs or constitute whole sentences, depending on how you translate them. So among my main resources, my really primary resource has been this textbook, which costs about $30-some and comes with over 550 pages of material across 36 chapters of dialogues, vocabulary, and grammar. And just to give a sense for how it's structured on the inside. Chapters usually start off with illustrations of the vocabulary, and then there's a kind of comic book style treatment of the dialogues, followed by some descriptions of grammar and exercises. So a very standard language textbook, which is awesome to have for an indigenous language in upstate New York. There are a few drawbacks to the book, though, that make it a bit hard to use for self-study. So vocabulary lists don't always include every word in the dialogue. There's sometimes dialogues have words that don't come up in the lists. The grammatical explanations are also kind of lacking a bit for the sake of colloquial clarity. So some grammatical concepts are developed throughout the course of the book rather than being explained all at once. So you get fragments of it rather than, say, a table of which pronoun prefixes to use in certain situations and whatnot. There's also no glossary at the end, but it does have English translations of all the dialogues listed next to the original Cayuga texts with the dialogues written in script format. So despite these drawbacks, one, beggars can't be choosers when it comes to resources for learning endangered languages or understudied languages in general. And two, this is actually a really great resource. It's clearly intended for classroom use, and I guess that it would likely be super successful with a teacher or a tutor who could go through the dialogues with the student and really explain the idiomatic nuances of the Cayuga language. Cayuga is a really rich language in the way that words are structured against each other, and how sentences are so heavily focused on action and verbs rather than static beings or categories of nouns. And trying to frame my own use of English around verbs has actually been a bit of an influence from my study of Cayuga, especially when I try to be relatively involved with local government and city planning here in Ithaca, and whenever I speak publicly, I try to choose my words really carefully so that they're focused on action and verbs, because otherwise, if you use nouns and categories you might start to have implications in the way that you frame urban affairs or policy questions in a way that winds up generating camps that people fall into and pit against each other. So it's kind of a fun way to try to decolonize my own political language thanks to the study of Cayuga. So since I have been studying independently, I did a bit of digging around on the internet and was overjoyed to find 2 really thorough grammars of Cayuga, as well as a free dictionary, and these resources have really clarified a lot of questions that the textbook by itself couldn't answer. And since it took me several hours to eventually dig up these resources, it will be nice to have a look at the blog post that's linked below so you can have a straight shot link at them. So if you really want to understand how the Cayuga language functions, I highly recommend the Language Patterns Manual published by the Ontario Ministry of Education, as well as the grammatical notes from the class that Dr. Carrie Dyke teaches at the Memorial University of Newfoundland in Canada. So with that, wadra suyo, swajago, good luck, and keep up the good work.